On a quiet Tuesday morning inside a glass tower overlooking Manhattan, the board of a billion-dollar construction firm gathered around a polished table, waiting for the investor who might save their struggling company. Suits worth thousands filled the room, voices low and confident, until the elevator doors opened and a man stepped in wearing a wrinkled jacket, dusty shoes, and carrying a small grocery bag. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the laughter started. One director whispered that he must be lost. Another joked that the janitor had wandered into the wrong meeting. Someone even suggested calling security. The man simply took a seat at the end of the table and quietly listened while they mocked him. Minutes later, he reached into his bag, pulled out a document, and prepared to sign the very $500 million deal the board had been desperately waiting for. And the moment they realized who he truly was, the laughter stopped and the room fell completely silent. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But this wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. The men laughing around that polished table believed they were watching a stranger embarrass himself in the wrong room. What they didn't realize was that the quiet man sitting across from them had spent years studying companies exactly like theirs. In the world of high-stakes corporate acquisitions, investors sometimes observe a company's leadership before trusting them with millions, a tactic that has quietly shaped several famous buyouts in American business history. So the real questions began to form. Who was this man that walked into a billion-dollar boardroom dressed like someone who didn't belong there? Why did he arrive alone, without assistants, lawyers, or the usual display of wealth? And why did he allow the insults to continue without defending himself? Because what those executives failed to understand in that moment was simple and terrifying. The quiet stranger across the table controlled the future of their entire company, and within minutes he would decide whether their empire would survive or collapse. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The company at the center of this story was Atlas Infrastructure Group, a construction empire that had quietly become one of the fastest rising contractors in the United States. Over the past decade, the firm secured billions of dollars in public and private projects, building highways, bridges, and corporate towers across several states. Headlines praised its rapid growth, and investors celebrated the soaring stock price. Inside the executive floor, however, the culture of the boardroom had developed a reputation employees rarely spoke about openly. The chairman, Richard Halvorson, was known for his sharp temper and for humiliating staff during meetings. The chief financial officer, Mark Dalton, focused only on profits and quarterly numbers. Another influential voice on the board, Laura Mitchell, pushed aggressively for a massive investment deal that could expand the company even further. To this group, appearance meant authority. Expensive suits, luxury offices, and status defined who mattered in the room. Hundreds of miles away, another man was quietly preparing for that same meeting. His name was Daniel Carter. He lived simply, drove an aging car, and owned little that hinted at wealth. Anyone seeing him step onto a train that morning would have assumed he was an ordinary traveler heading to work. Yet Daniel Carter held the power to approve or destroy the $500 million deal Atlas desperately needed. And the way he planned to enter that boardroom was completely intentional. Atlas Infrastructure had reached a dangerous moment. Despite years of rapid expansion, the company needed a massive injection of outside capital to keep several major projects alive. Without it, executives feared layoffs, a collapsing stock price, and the possibility that lenders could begin closing in. The board knew there was only one firm powerful enough to stabilize their situation: Carter Global Holdings, a private investment group known for stepping into high-stakes deals across the United States. The representative arriving to approve the agreement was Daniel Carter himself, yet none of the directors had ever met him. Late that morning, the elevator doors opened, and a quiet man stepped onto the executive floor wearing a worn jacket and carrying a small bag. The receptionist hesitated, unsure if he belonged there. When he entered the boardroom, the reaction came quickly. One executive muttered that security should remove him. Another laughed and said the delivery entrance was downstairs. Someone joked he must be there to clean the room. Laughter spread around the table, while the man simply took a seat and said nothing, leaving the entire room unaware of what was about to unfold. The laughter inside the boardroom slowly turned into irritation as the chairman, Richard Halvorson, leaned forward and stared at the quiet stranger sitting at the end of the table. In a sharp voice, he said they were expecting someone from Carter Global Holdings, not whatever this was supposed to be. The man said nothing at first. Instead, he calmly reached into his bag and pulled out a thin folder, placing it neatly on the polished table. No one bothered to look. A few executives continued making jokes, and the room filled with quiet chuckles as if the meeting had become entertainment. For nearly 2 full minutes, the directors mocked the stranger while discussing whether security should remove him. Then the man finally spoke in a calm voice that cut through the laughter. He said he believed they were waiting for him. The room paused. Chairman Halvorson leaned back and asked a simple question. "Who exactly are you?" Without raising his voice, the man slowly slid a document across the table, and the moment the first executive read the name printed on the page, the laughter stopped. The executive who picked up the document expected to find a joke, but instead his expression changed instantly. Printed across the top of the page was the logo of Carter Global Holdings, the investment firm every person in that room had been waiting for all morning. The signature line was already prepared, and the name on the document matched the quiet man sitting at the end of the table. In that moment, the truth became impossible to ignore. The poorly dressed stranger across from them was not a delivery driver, not a confused visitor, and certainly not someone who had wandered into the wrong meeting. He was Daniel Carter, the founder of Carter Global Holdings and the man holding control of the $500 million investment that could determine whether Atlas Infrastructure survived. The laughter disappeared immediately. One executive's face turned pale, while another quickly began apologizing under his breath. Chairman Richard Halvorson stared across the table without speaking. Daniel Carter calmly picked up a pen, reviewed the agreement for a brief moment, and then signed his name across the contract while the room watched in complete silence. But the story was not finished. After signing the document, Daniel Carter slowly closed the folder and looked around the boardroom at the same executives who had been laughing only minutes earlier. The silence in the room felt heavy as every eye followed him. Then he spoke calmly and said he wanted to see how they treated people when they believed those people had nothing. No one interrupted him. The same men who had mocked him now sat quietly, unsure what would happen next. Daniel continued, explaining that companies which judge others by appearance eventually destroy their own reputation and leadership. Several board members shifted in their seats, realizing the meeting had taken a turn they never expected. Then Daniel delivered the sentence that changed everything. He said the deal they had just watched him sign was not an investment. For a moment, the room looked confused. Then he clarified the truth. It was a buyout. That meant control of Atlas Infrastructure had just changed hands, and in less than 5 minutes the man they laughed at had become their new boss. But here is the real question this story leaves behind. If you had been sitting in that boardroom that morning, watching a quiet man walk in wearing worn clothes and carrying a small bag, would you have treated him any differently than they did? Moments earlier, those executives believed power always arrived dressed in expensive suits and polished shoes. Yet the person holding control of their company looked like someone they were ready to dismiss. Stories like this appear throughout American business history, where investors quietly observe leadership before trusting them with massive deals. And sometimes those first impressions reveal more than any financial report. In that room, the lesson arrived quickly. Authority does not always announce itself with status or wealth. Sometimes it enters quietly and waits to see how people behave. So think about that moment carefully. What would you have done in that boardroom? Let me know in the comments. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.